Thank you very much. Thank you, all the organizers, and it's also a great time to feel very honored to be among esteemed colleagues also from Denmark. And today I will not speak as an art historian and theorist of curating, but I will just speak as a curator, just presenting a project. I believe there will be a lot of, let's say, interlinks that we can find and then discuss based on that. And we'll have also the opportunities to, let's say, the opportunity to discuss more in terms of theoretical bridgings. So I will talk as the curator of AthenSYN, which is a very small institution, and Ariana has made a short interpretation there. This has been created in 2015. I'm the co-creator of that together with my colleague Katja Erhardt. Now, one of the projects that we've done is this here, Universitas. It was called Universitas, a community of teachers and learners, and you will see that it relates really, I believe, a lot to what we have been discussing up to here. So the idea was actually what you find here, basically like bring people from Syria, Greece, and Germany together and create a kind of like threefold project. It consisted of workshops, an exhibition, and a publication. So talking about the workshops were held actually in locations where refugees, migrants are to be found, basically the Skaramangas and Elefsina camps. We all know them. The so-called, actually, Domes Philoxenias. They use the word philoxenia, although the word philoxenia has actually nothing to do with what we're discussing. Just as a reminder, like when we talk about philoxenia in Greek, it means that a foreigner comes by your door, right? And then you're eating your Sunday best food. You open the door and you give the best piece of that food to the foreigner. That's what we call philoxenia in Greece. This is not the case when we're discussing detention camps. Right. So, however, the ministry was actually very open enough to allow us actually to make this project there. The Hora Athens and the Athens Biennial were two other locations. I will discuss them also briefly. And then we had the exhibition, which was also part and supported by the Athens Biennial at that time, and the publication. May I have the next one, please? This is the basic idea, creative workshops between migrants and Athenians to develop a vision of our common future in which we grow together and learn from one another. So, stories and dreams contributed by migrants and Athenians to artists will be part of a world's history that we write together. This new collective story will be presented to the public as part of the exhibition and of the Athens Biennial and the book I was discussing earlier on. So that was the goal, so to say. This is what we were set up to do. In a way, it responds a little bit to what Sabine here discussed, and we will also see if it happened properly or not, if we succeeded or not. Let's see the next one, please. So just an image of the Skaramanga camp as a reminder. I have to say I have no images of the workshops because we were not allowed to make any kind of image, right? So, not even in terms of like private documentation. So the photographs were taken off, right? The machines, we wouldn't allow to have any kind of machinery. So I found that on internet just as an idea. The next one would be the Hora, which I'm really happy to say that such a place exists in Greece. The Hora is an autonomous place, self-organized. Greeks and non-Greeks all work together. They do have a free shop, a social kitchen. This is extremely important. We talk also about the time, actually, it was actually the time of the crisis as well. An asylum support team, a so-called beehive. So the beehive is actually a maker's shop. So you can go there and you create your own stuff, and a sound lab as well. So the kitchen, I have worked a little bit at the kitchen. The social kitchen is actually a very important place where people come together, cook together, eat together. The eating together, I believe, is extremely important part in terms of like discussing this merging and entanglement. They do have also simple things like a dentist, for example. You can imagine people in that Hora told us how important that is. I mean, every single one of us has no problem. You can go to the doctor at any time, book, this is .com, book your dentist appointment. It's not an issue, but not for the people actually out there, many hundreds of the Athenians, migrant Athenians, that they don't have this luxury. So you can understand that we talk about small little things that they do make actually a difference. So Hora was one of our, let's say, important supporters, and many of the workshops actually were held at Hora. And the third place was the next one, as a reminder again. This is Bagion. You remember the biennial of 2015. It had also the name Omonia. And this is actually the place where some of the workshops were held. It's also like a place where the, let's say, the biennial of Athens happened. Here, we are here on the one of those meetings. Here on top of that, we see also there Massimiliano Molona. This is the gentleman here, who's the curator, together with Paul Prestiado. This is the other gentleman here. It was also the only time that we managed to bring those two institutions together. That was the Athens Biennial and the Documenta. Prestiado was one of the important curators of the Documenta 14 to be held in biennial. They wouldn't talk to each other, so we thought let's bring them together for just for a short meeting. Anyway, this is another sub-story. We can discuss it a little bit later if you want. Right. So, sorry, and Julia Strauss, yes, not to forget, very important, from the Astronomy Academia, who was the third partner, actually, together with AthenSYN, organizing the project, a very important project partner. Thank you, Dionys, very important. So, let's move on. That's just a statement. That's actually from the official website of the biennial, Athens Biennial. So, in a way, the point I'm making is that, of course, the Athens Biennial arises as a reaction to the current political and social conditions and wants to activate the public through art and contemporary theoretical views. So why I'm showing this? Because it's important to say that all institutional framework needed actually to work together, or to put it differently, we have found a niche so as we can fit in and have, first of all, a place to be publicly, let's say, present, number one, and secondly, also the money. The money came from the Allianz Foundation, which is based in Germany. It's one of the most important, like, say, foundations in terms of social security. And I have to say that it was luckily enough that their agenda, the agenda of Allianz, was very fitting, actually, to what was going on around in Europe at that time. You understand my point. So the institutional support, the money givers, right, have to be somehow aligned. So for a project like that to happen, a small project as the one I'm discussing here. So let's move on to the second one. I just want you to see the poster, and we had three varieties of that poster. One very important issue, and this is the reason why I'm showing this, the design is done by Julia Strauss, the lady that you've seen earlier on, and she said something very simple. Yes, it has to be also in Arabic, right? We are inviting people here to participate, and are you sure that you speak what language they speak, right? In most of the cases when we're discussing, concepts like that, and we talk about like projects that relate migrants to non-migrants, we talk in English, but it's not necessarily the case. So that's the reason why I wanted you to see that as well. That's the logo, actually, of the event, right? So we move on into the next one. The different workshops, I don't want to go into detail. I will discuss only some of them when we're coming into the exhibition. We have to say also that the workshops, as you see, they were taking place in different places again. And they have also, it was a mix between basically like Athens, Greek artists and German artists as well. You remember I'm saying this because AthenSYN has as its focus actually to align Greek and German artists. So it's not that, it has to do with, let's say, the agenda of that specific organization, right? But we can see some of the exhibitions, some of the artifacts, some of the exhibits that we have. Maybe we move on into the next one, because I would like to discuss it with you, what we are looking at here. So you have the names underneath, Julia Strauss and Thomas Clipper. I have to say that for the exhibition, we had outcomes of the workshops, but we had at the same time invited artists, so artists that they didn't participate to the workshops, just because of their work. So you'll see some other works here. For example, Thomas Clipper, I'll have the next one. Yeah, he's an artist actually that he has created images of all the places in which immigrants in Germany have been attacked. So perhaps some of them are known, like in Leipzig, I think it's one of the most known actually events. Brands and refugees actually set in fire, homes of refugees set in fire, and so on. And this is done in a very clumsy way, if you want. This is the idea behind also, to have this, if you want, like this kind of like aesthetics of a fast journalism, or a kind of like reminder, right? So that would be one. Let's see the next one. This is Dionys Christophilogiannis here. I think who's also present. I think it's very clear what we have here, like the symbolism of that thermal blanket, that it has been discarded. Actually, it was found all around Greece. We talk about the Greek islands and the migrants actually coming from Turkey, mainly Turkey, and the south of Mediterranean as well. But of course, in here there is also a change, because the blanket is also made as the Greek flag. So it's the, let's say, non-typical Greek flag, and at the same time a blanket which is like fallen. We had also a debate, or had a discussion with the artist. The artist wanted to put the blanket on the wall, and the curator, I was the curator, no, you have to leave it fallen, actually. So this is like the happy, beautiful things that happen between an artist and the curator when they create together a show. Let's move on to the next one. This is the Mythiczamurans, and what you see here, it's a classical, romantic, perhaps beautiful landscape, a sea, right? So nobody would actually think, well, what's the link here between our theme? Well, the point is that the artist traveled to the specific location in the Mediterranean in which migrants were died. So what you see here, it's a kind of like, if you want, remake in the very dramatic scene, if you want, of the tomb, right, of migrants. So in a way, the interlinking there, it's a kind of like hidden, so you have to read what the whole thing is about, but I think it's a very distinct. We move on to the next one. And this is now a work of art that came out of the workshop. This is a work by Manav Halbouni, who is a Syrian artist living in Berlin. And he has put the question, just how would it be if each of us suddenly had the power to change the course of history and everyone had the opportunity to create his own state? What would your new country look like? What would be your goals as a king, president, or dictator even, and so on? This what if, actually is the basis of a kind of like game, if you want. And he played that game with migrants, people in the refugee camps, but also in the streets. They created their own worlds, if you want. The idea behind that was very simple. He said, well, I don't want to make a fuss around it. Let's have a game, a simple game that will suffice actually for making this, let's say, starting this discussion over. So that would be that here, the next one. And of course the interviews, because they were also linked to, you had also the audio, so you could hear actually what these people were saying. So why a king, right? I mean, why you do this, why you do that? So it gave actually all this background information for us to understand how people would think and how they create their, let's say, fictional empires. You can understand there were a lot of information actually on there. So even like, judging between what, one person done according to the other, you will see a lot of, let's say, interesting issues arising, political as well as issues in terms of, like, let's say, imaginaries, or like political imaginaries, existing and future. So that will be the next one. No, that's very interesting work by Vilma Andriotti. It was actually about storytelling and performing. One of the more important questions that she put was what she calls toxic waiting. this is basically like toilet paper, right? And she made, this is precisely now the point, like one of the very valuable commodities in a refugee camp is the toilet paper. Simple as that. I mean, this kind of like simplicity of like what you need, right? This is what they need. They need electricity and they need toilet paper. Simple as that. And of course, the whole game was around that. What you see here is a photograph that it was created based on this kind of like game. It was a like performative game that Vilma did with people. That was in Baguio. All right. We move on into the next one. Susanne Winterling, great artist from Berlin, and she actually talked about that. Now, she talked about, let's say, one of the basic ideas or one of the basic concepts in her work is this idea of commons, like common resources and so on. One of them is water. Now, interestingly enough, she talked about that with people from the camps, and they created together, let's see the next one, sculptures. These are micro sculptures of water. She's using a very simple technique so as to solidify the water. So what you have here is like one person in the Skaramagas camp holding water. And of course you can understand that the whole political issue behind water and water resources is very important. When we talk about also like Middle Eastern policies, it's not only necessarily only about oil, it's also about water policies and water resources. So it's not, now why I'm showing this, because it's actually, on one side you have the idea of an artist. I mean, we didn't tell the artist what to do. That was her project, but she has adjusted that project so as to, let's say, find a common language with the refugees or the people with the other participants. I believe it's a very important case here. I mean, in all of the cases, and that's the reason why I'm showing this, is that the choice of the artist, the curatorial choice of the artist, and of course the way that the artists have responded, has somehow reflected also the needs of the participants without, however, I'm talking as a curator now, so of course after that I might critique myself and say, no, that was not the way you saw it. But it's another thing. Anyway, talking from the curatorial point of view, we believe at least that in this case, these artists have always managed to somehow match their own experiences, their own beliefs, their own working methods and practices to matching basically what the theme was and the experience of the others. So please keep that in mind, and I would like also your critique when we move on into the next pieces as well. Let's see the next one. This is by Liva, a film. We showed the film. She has worked together with refugees, talking actually about one of the very important storytelling idea, and was actually focusing on the idea of fear. The whole discussion was about fear, what it means actually, let's say, to how you trace stories of one about the other, about the unknown, and of course about the very basic fact that no one is ever prepared for what is coming. You are never prepared to become a refugee, right? So that's precisely the issue, to become outside of, let's say, your, let's say, common ground. We move on to the next one. This is by Gudrun. We have to say that the artist here has worked together. She has collected actually images from the smartphones of every participant. So what can you do? Which is actually, let's say, your, how we can say it, like part of your identity is what you have on your iPhone, what you have on your smartphone. So she will use this material so as to construct poetic images. You might be able to see a little bit here the container, actually. It's one of the containers. And mixing it with other images, let's see the next one perhaps, which is more poetic, but it's the same thing. So let's say nature and container mixed together, all found material coming from the participants. And the next one, which is a work I really like, this is by Georgia Kotretsos. The artist, before talking about that specific piece here, we have, and so in order to understand what the whole thing is about, we have to say that the artist has worked together with people, with participants, and they talked about dreams, needs, and desires, right? So that was the basic thing. But I have to say that, and this is now what the artist told me, She said, you know, after all that, I realized that actually the goal was to go beyond the stigma of being a refugee. And when we talk about the stigma, we don't talk only about the stigma which is imposed by, let's say, the management of crisis, by authorities, by the others on the refugees, but the stigma that the refugees actually internalize. That's precisely the issue here. She said that that was the critical part, because they accept themselves as being different after 1 year of detention, after 3 years of waiting for the asylum, and so on and so on. And for me, that was the project. The project was actually to make them remember, right, what they want. What were their desires? The whole thing was about that. So, yes, I want to be a football player. I want to be a doctor. I want to be this. I want to be a cook, whatsoever. I want to be a chef. Please think of all these people, and I'm saying that because for me that was also my first experience, I have to say, anthropologically speaking. I met friends through those projects, right? Friends that I met after that, and we had fun, we celebrated as well. And I have to say it was a very important moment actually to break this barrier and realize, look, these are really very normal people, like all of us, right? It's nothing very specific about them, right? So, they're not heroes, they're forced maybe to become heroes, right? And there are people that they have a very everyday life, as we all have. Please think we are really in a kind of like colonialist and post-colonialist globalized world. So what we do, they do as well. Regardless if they live in Aleppo, if they live somewhere in Indonesia, whatsoever. That's precisely the point, right? And this is actually now what Kotretos explained to me as well. And for that reason, she made that, which is a very funny work of art, actually. It's a banana. So what it is to be a refugee, she says, well, it's simply like you slip over a banana and you fall. That's it. It happens to everyone. Let's put it this way. So understand also the, let's say, the ironic commentary behind that. So now you understand also the work. And let's see the next one. Here these are galvanized, of course. These are beautiful objects as well. You can buy them. So, all right, let's move to the next one. And this is, of course, the last great piece by Julia Strauss. We have to say that she created portraits of all workshop participants. This is what you have, some of them. Lovely guy from Afghanistan as well. And, of course, the portraits were created during a dialogue. So it was actually a type of interviews, and all those interviews were all documented in the book that I'm talking about, and documented in a way without changing anything in the way that they express themselves. I mean, it's not necessarily the best type of English, but we left it as it is. That's the idea. And of course it creates, let's say, it is the moment, and you can actually understand it only when you read those scripts, this dialogue, when you actually you understand that I believe that the art is in the position of the one who learns now, right? He doesn't put the questions, it's the other way around. So that's a very important moment, and you talk about the dialogue as a kind of moment of like post-migrant understanding of communal space. I believe this is also what happened here. But at the same time, it's also, let's say, we talked about the ban of, let's say, non-photographing. In a way, it's also, it uses this very old-fashioned medium here, like, will be like making a drawing, so as to discuss precisely this issue. So, more also, now you understand, I gave you kind of like explanation of the works, and in a way I wanted also to make a point here regarding what was the curatorial point of view. So, I would just want now, I don't want to tire you, I just want to make 2 points, basically discussing the curatorial background of that exhibition. We said that the idea was actually to bring people together, the ones who teach with the ones who learn. That's the idea of universitas as well. Universitas, actually, the Latin word means a community of people. Someone is teaching, someone is learning. The question was, who is teaching who to whom, right? So we try to change that. We try to change that. For me, the project, and with Kotretsos, it was very clear, because she has learned something. What she has learned that we cannot learn too much, actually, out of that, to put it in a simple way. One of our guiding ideas was the text, maybe we see the next one. I think I have the next one. The text, We Refugees by Hannah Arendt. It was a text written in 1943. It's a kind of like classical text. And according to another thinker who has thought and extensively worked on this issue, George Agamben, you're all familiar with his work, the Homo Sacer, Arendt overturns the condition of refugee and person without a country in order to propose this condition as the paradigm of a new historical consciousness. In her essay, Arendt argues that the right of migrants to be politically active and to participate in social practices is pivotal, acknowledging in them the vanguard of their peoples. So the refugee is the avant-garde of their peoples. I think it's a very important statement. And I think Willem Flusser, who is another thinker actually, and we talk about the kind of like post-migrant, let's say, environment. I'm a fan of Willem Flusser. He's a Brazilian, Czech-born Jew of a German culture. And he always, of course, discusses precisely this kind of like intermixing of identities that we talked a little bit before starting. It will be very interesting to hear what he has to say, a fascinating and original European thinker, in his essay collection, The Challenge of the Migrant. Flusser questions the viability of ideas of national identity in a world whose borders are becoming increasingly arbitrary and permeable. He argues that modern societies are in flux, with traditional, linear, and textual epistemologies being challenged by a global circulatory network and the growth in visual stimulation. Homeland, or Heimat, Flusser uses in the English word, the German original. It has more connotations than the word homeland, and that's of course very interesting, the way that the words can be translated. The patrida in Greek will be different than the Heimat in German, or the homeland in English. So homeland, Heimat, is for him not a given and a stable category. Heimat is associated with the freedom to move, even when this move is painful and dangerous. And the freedom to move is to care about some people. This is what he says. The freedom to move relates to caring about people. People are not only the ones you leave behind, but also for the ones you will find in your path. So this is a totally different understanding of what a Heimat is. Caring is Heimat. This is homeland. And this is, as Flusser says, cannot be equated with philanthropy, cosmopolitanism, or humanitarianism. Flusser calls the migrant the representative of human species per se. A human species in a world to come, perhaps, a world that is coming already, a post-migrant world without a Heimat. The one who brings with him unconscious bits and pieces of all the homelands in which he has been wandering around without settling in none of them. This is Flusser, almost quote. I've changed it a little bit. The migrant is a window through which those who are left behind can see themselves, but it's also a mirror for them, albeit a distorted mirror, says Flusser. And this transparency is discomforting for many because this transparency states quite eloquently that all the mystery and even the nostalgia related to the notion of the homeland has already stopped existing. Every person without a Heimat is in this regard the awakened consciousness of the ones who do have one, a one which is perishing, however. It's a little bit poetic, it's I found it very beautiful, actually. It concentrates somehow the ideas that we're discussing here. Flusser talks about those aliens, Agamben about the refugees, Arendt talks about the pariahs. So, and I believe, maybe you can move on into the next one, which I make a kind of like link here. Again, I would like you please to, let's say, have in mind these ideas of Flusser, because it will be interesting to make a point based on them in our coming discussion. Of course, we talk about the migrants' route. Want to make a point here that we started this project. It was again in 2017 as a kind of like in the aftermath of the Balkan route of the migrants. We have seen also the images, but it was also at the same time in the aftermath of the next one, an image that you all know. Can you see the next one? You remember here the little boy, Alan Kurdi, and of course here comes again this question about the sensationalism of all the projects actually that relate to that. One of the main challenges of the project was to avoid the problems that accompany this image production and distribution of the refugee crisis. Projects have been attacked sometimes for the unethical sensationalism of images, and sometimes for the desensitizing effects of these images. The next one, there are many of those actually, right? I mean, this is like one of the cases, right? Talking about an image, then it becomes like the input of another image, and so on, so on. So for us, it was also this question, and coming again to the issue of how can you talk about someone when this someone is not present, but at the same time, if this someone is present, how you can, let's say, secure that this presence of him, her, is not sensationalist, right? That it doesn't become prey to the media, that it doesn't become actually yet another image of no significance. That's the basic question, again. And perhaps this is also like a question, maybe we move on into the next one. Here I have another one. You remember the lady in red? I thought this is also interesting to, let's say, bring it in again in the discussion of how an image can become a kind of like cultural symbol. Why I'm saying that? Because I'm not sure what we can do with images, and the project was also not sure what you can do with images, because you can even say, and that will be a counterpoint, that perhaps images do have a political effect. Images create an affective, if you want, entanglement. We've seen many projects actually, and has also presented a great project actually, in which images do have this political impact. So this is for me perhaps those two questions to discuss. First of all, the impact of images. Secondly, this notion of like learning, unlearning, learning together. And I will finish with the last image here, because I have to say also that the experience with the university's project had led us to another project. We have called that the School of Everything, and it was a symposium that it was presented in the context of Documenta 14 in Kassel and Athens. So what was the School of Everything? It was an effort actually to discuss alternative educational formats understood as research-based activist works of art in many cases, developing anti-border, open source and horizontal knowledge-sharing platforms, talking about an alternative pedagogy, if you want, an alternative sharing of knowledge. And I think it's important to say that we did have a mix of people. The gentleman that you see here is Monsieur Ramon, who is like the president of the Lucas School of Art in Belgium. This is the biggest school of art in Europe. So talking together with people that they came out of our workshops, right? I think even in terms of symbolism, right? Being in the same stage, one here and one there next to, I think that for me at least had an impact. So I'm just putting this also into question, right? In discussing those issues. Perhaps let's see some more images. All has been also documented. Here you have also another participant taking notes. Great one. And we had also documentation of all that experience. So that was what I wanted to say. It's a very short discussion. I will have the time to discuss it and make the interconnections. Right. Thank you very much. Thank you.